My third favourite all-time motorsport memory was probably going back to 2007, and it's the British Speedway Grand Prix at what was then the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. And it was just remarkable because the British rider, Chris Harris, who was never a potential world champion, with the greatest respect to Chris, raced in over 100 GPs. But it was one of the most remarkable grand finals I've ever seen, because you got 45,000 Brits in that brilliant, brilliant stadium following this final. And Chris Harris was just closing in, reeling in the leader, Greg Hancock. And he timed his move to perfection. And it was the underdog, if you like, getting the checkered flag. And that was just the most amazing moment for me, in the commentary box. Nearly lost my voice on that occasion. Shiver down the spine and all the rest of it. But the way he just dived up the inside and brought the house down in front of 45,000 passionate Brits. And then I remember it was like the last night of the proms, because there were the flag was flying everywhere, thousands of flags to Land of Hope and Glory and all this. It was like the last night of the proms. And for Chris Harris to achieve that, very much the underdog. He was never going to be world champion, but he was such a loyal servant to the Grand Prix series. He always managed to get in there, and I love him for it. And for him to win that meeting like he did against Greg Hancock, 4 times world champion, now he's ended his career, won 4 world titles, that will always go down in my memory as a real standout moment. Dramatic motorsport, great viewing figures on Sky Sports at the time, and great to commentate on for sure. I've got to say my second most favourite motorsport memory has to go back to the very beginning and how I got into the sport of motorcycle speedway when we used to live in Yorkshire, and my father took me to the Boulevard Stadium in Hull, sadly no longer with us, and we went to the Yorkshire Television Trophy in 1976. And the Yorkshire Television Trophy always had fantastic riders. And I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but I do remember it, even though I'm in my 50s now, looking back on this 6-year-old kid turning up with his dad at the Boulevard Stadium in Hull. And I was just grasped by the crowd coming in, the big grandstand on the home straight that we sat in, the smell of the bikes in the pits when the riders started warming the bikes up pre-meeting, and also the parade music, the tannoy system, the announcer giving all the race results out. You know, people had rattles, and fans had rattles, and everybody was just having a great time. You know, back in the day where the grandstand had cigarette smoke blowing all through it, including my dad doing that. And it was just a magical moment for a 6-year-old kid. And then afterwards, we'd take the program down to where the riders at the Boulevard used to have to walk from the pits across the track and then go down the rugby league tunnel, which was right by where the fans were mingling. Anyway, I got by the pit gate, and I remember picking up a tear-off, a clear visor tear-off that a rider had ripped off on the track, and I picked that up. And I got some of the riders to sign the program as well. So that was the Yorkshire Television Trophy from 1976, first ever meeting, and that has to go down in my top 3 motorsport moments. I've got no doubt about my favourite motorsport memory, and it was a world final, a one-off world final in 1985 at the Odsal Stadium in Bradford. And being a massive Cradley Heath Speedway supporter at the time, having moved down to the Midlands, Eric Gunderson was my favourite rider. Such a fantastic racer, classy, well turned out, very quick from the start. And he was the man I wanted to win at Odsal that day. There was probably 35,000 fans. Odsal had been renovated, redeveloped, had modern facilities back then. And it was packed all the way around this bowl. Odsal Stadium is this unique bowl. It's like a hole in the ground as you drive past it at the top by the Richard Dunn Sports Centre. As you enter Odsal, you look down, and it's just like this massive bowl. Had over 100,000 in for a Rugby League Challenge Cup final in the early days. So, but on that day, that was the day I was really rooting for Eric Gunderson. Because your club, for some reason back then, your club colours were more important than your country colours. I should have been cheering for my old friend Kelvin Tatum, and I didn't. I wanted Eric to win because he was my favourite rider, Danish rider, Anyway, he made a mess of his first race. He went wide, and he only got 1 point in his first race. And back then, in a one-off world final, something like that can scupper your chances of winning a race, of winning the title. Anyway, in his final race, he went from third to first. He got a handful of gas, and he went. And Odsal had really steep banking. 2 American riders were on the inside, and another American rider, Sam Ermolenko, was in with a chance of winning the world title. So for me, I suspected that the American boys might have been shielding Gunderson to try and help Ermolenko's chances. Anyway, Eric thought, this is now or never. And going into the third turn, he's got it wound on full blast, and he decides to go so high into the banking that he's almost kissing the fence, a wooden fence. But he gets this most amazing drive, and coming off the banking down onto the straight, he'd blown the 2 Americans away. So that got him into a runoff for the title. And that was with Sam Ermolenko and Hans Nielsen. Now, Gunderson and Nielsen were great rivals, even though they're fellow countrymen, Danes. And anyway, Eric, I could tell, was so cool on the start line. And I knew he was one of the fastest starters in the world. But at 15 years of age, I could hardly watch. I got knots in my stomach. I felt sick. So goodness knows how those 3 riders felt on the start line. But that was just me wanting Eric to win. Anyway, in that final, Eric was so cool at the start line. He was letting air through his goggles, just resting his clutch while the others were digging the track on the inside. Eric was just cool, just stayed there, resting his clutch, nice and relaxed. Anyway, the start marshal pulls him to the line. Eric just lets his goggles go, shrugged his shoulders as he did, went to the start line, and then he dropped the clutch, and Hans Nielsen was level with him, and Hans Nielsen could have got the drop on him by going wide. But Eric just leaned on him, and then he got the drive going down the back straight and pulled clear, and he was never going to be caught from there. The celebrations there were grown adults jumping up and down, and I got beer spilt all over my head, and I'm jumping up and down as though my football team had scored a winning goal. And when Eric won that title, that was one of the most happiest moments of my childhood. But what he did there was prove that he could handle pressure. He had bottle, and he had true class. And that in motorsport is absolutely vital. And that's what Eric Gunderson did, and I'll never, ever forget that. And that will probably be my favourite motorsport moment for the rest of my life. I don't ever see that. It'll never get any better than that for me.